So a little bit about me. I am CTO of a company called StatFlow here in Toronto. I run a regular meetup for DevOps. It's been going for a while, called DevOpsDaysTO. And a couple of years back, I made a thing called the Devops Checklist that you can check out. I hope it's still valid, but let me know. It still works. But it's been a while since I put that together. I would love to hear your comments if you want to go investigate it. So I want to say welcome to everybody who's joining us from elsewhere, joining us from Toronto, joining us for the first time. I think it's a wonderful thing to have you be a part of this. This is the reason why we make it bigger every year, is to just bring more people in. And in the past, it's always tight. We always sell out super far in advance, but we're always worried about making it too big. So hopefully the size works well for you guys, and we're really happy to have you. So a little bit about Toronto. Toronto gets varying reputations about being confrontational or distant or cold, or Canada's New York and whatever else. Which is very un-DevOps. And I want to sort of have this conference be a safe space for everyone who's from Toronto and outside Toronto. Treat this as a completely separate thing, right? Be social, be engaged with other people, meet whoever you can. You never know. I run into people today that I met at Devops Days years and years ago, and they're still great friends. And it's amazing to see them here, and it's amazing to see them elsewhere when I travel to other conferences. So we are, did I miss a slide? I don't know. So we are approaching 10 years of DevOps. I mean, the inception of DevOps is kind of up for debate, but it's been quite a while. And it's now 5 years of DevOpsDaysTO. So our conference, our series here in Toronto, this is our 5th anniversary. So thank you for joining us on this big day for us. It's been a ride, and hopefully we're getting better every year. That's the idea. But it has been quite an evolution for us. In terms of DevOps, I don't know how many people have heard, but DevOps kind of had its birth here in Toronto in 2008. There was a conference called Agile 2008, and 2 people from other countries. There was an American and what do we call people who are from Belgium? Belgian? A Belgian, of course, of course. I'm under a lot of pressure, guys. But they came to this conference, and I think it was Patrick Dubois that was running a talk. No, it was the other way around. I think it was Andrew Clay Schaefer that was running a talk on Agile infrastructure, and almost nobody showed up, but Patrick and Andrew had this conversation, and that sort of kicked off all of this activity. Patrick went back to Ghent, where he's from, and started the first DevOps Days in 2009. And we're approaching the anniversary of that, I think, early next year. So Toronto was kind of instrumental in the beginnings of DevOps, and I've always found that kind of fascinating. We don't really think of Toronto as a big tech conference hub, but amazing things do happen here. So hopefully you hear some stuff that affects us 10 years from now today in a positive way through our program. So also 2009, this is kind of like the inception of a lot of big tools that are still in play today. It's still really important. Puppet, Chef Jenkins, I put their original logos. Jenkins hasn't changed much. I couldn't find a really retro one. But a lot of these companies have changed over the years. They're still really big in Toronto. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from these infrastructure as code companies in Toronto, just because we have lots of big financial firms and lots of infrastructure to deal with. 2010, we saw CAMs arise. This came out of the DevOps Cafe podcast, I think. And it was just the idea that, DevOps is kind of this holistic thing that incorporates many, many different aspects of software development and interpersonal relationships on development teams. 2010, continuous delivery. How many people have read Continuous Delivery? It's kind of a big book in terms of selling, a vision start to finish of what DevOps means in terms of execution. I just heard from an ex-coworker who came and told me that my copy of Continuous Delivery is still at my previous place of employment. It's signed by Jez, and it's now been passed on to someone else who's going to bring it back tomorrow to try and get it signed by Jez when he's here. And I thought that was kind of awesome. 2011, we started the meetup, so it actually fell on my shoulders. I kind of volunteered at first, and then the owners of the meetup got sent down to San Francisco, so I took that on, and it's been running ever since, every month or so, and it's amazing. I encourage you to come out to the meetup. It's really where these long and in-depth conversations happen, and it's pretty amazing. So after this point, sort of between 2011, 2014, we have the rise of enterprise DevOps. A lot of books came out, a lot of big, important books that people commonly mention and reference. And people started to apply these concepts to large organizations. And 2013, we saw the rise of Docker and Slack, or huge tools. How many people use one or both of those? Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. 2014, we started the first DevOps Days. This is Luke Canese from Puppet Labs. I still don't understand how we got Luke Canese for our year one keynote, but it was amazing. And that was in a venue probably, I don't know, an eighth of this size. We didn't even have a projector screen. That's a blank white wall. It was very agile, but awesome. 2014, we also see the rise of DevOps transformation as a concept and as a serious focus. You'll see Nicole tomorrow. Nicole basically started the State of DevOps report, which basically has an overview of what's going on in terms of DevOps in the enterprise. And that's when I wrote up the Devops Checklist, because I got really into maturity modeling and the idea that you can measure yourself against what best practices look like, and get some concrete answers about like where to start, what to focus on, and what you're missing. Toronto in 2018 is becoming potentially a very tech-focused place. There's a lot of competition for machine learning and AI. To claim the title of a city that's focused on that stuff. Sidewalk Labs is supposed to just mess up the city a lot, hopefully in good ways, but we'll all be tracked everywhere we go in the future, which hopefully means that only good things follow that. We'll see. We also could be HQ2 for Amazon, who knows, that might happen. Apparently we're in the final 3 or something. That's pretty exciting. And in 2018, DevOps is absolutely everywhere, right? I mean, everywhere that tech touches, DevOps is there. And it's really become central in making sure that things are being executed on, that there is a degree of rigor in what we do, and we're doing it collaboratively. And I think that's what I love so much about it, is that it's really central to a lot of what's going on in tech. In terms of what's really happening right now, Kubernetes is a massive thing. How many people in the audience are using Kubernetes? That's a lot. I mean, back when we were 2014, we took a survey on how many people were using Docker, and it was like 3 people. And I think one person was using it in production, and we had basically an open space that was just 1 million people asking that person questions about like, isn't everything on fire? Like, how are you here right So we've come a long way. It's become a lot easier to adopt new technology, and I think we're seeing a lot of acceleration. That's really, it's really exciting. My emojis got really weird. So data is a huge deal. We're now drowning in data. The coming years are going to be a big challenge in how we deal with all this data that we're now burying ourselves in all the time. How to sift through it, how to get value out of it, and then how to not be fined into oblivion for leaving it where we shouldn't leave it. Which brings me to compliance. Compliance, as we accumulate all this data, we've hit this point where now data is becoming a liability, right? It's everywhere, and you don't want it everywhere. You don't want it everywhere that it is. So I think it's really interesting to have GDPR be a thing right now, and everyone thinking about, okay, well, we were just piling data and amassing it as fast as we could, and now you're telling us that we have to actually treat it as if it's, as valuable as we think it is. So it's an interesting problem for companies now, and I think we'll see a lot come out of that in the coming years in terms of how do we do this responsibly, and how do we do it so that it's valuable and not risky. Security is a constant concern, but especially as we evolve DevOps, we bring more people into systems. We've got more partnerships, more tools, more access requirements, more fine-grained requirements everywhere. So anyone who's working on security, I think you're pretty safe in terms of having some very solid business in the coming years. Serverless is an interesting thing that's sort of bubbling up all the time. I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff. It's kind of hitting production now for a lot of people. Anyone using Lambda functions or some function in production? Cool. Okay. Define production. You may have a problem, sir. You may have a problem. How do I go back to my compliance slide? If anyone wants to know what production is, we can have birds of a feather. Clouds. Now public cloud is a massive thing. How many companies are using a public cloud right now? Very cool. How many are using production clouds for their main production workflow? Public cloud for main production workflow. Okay, cool. I think that matches. AWS still in the forefront, but obviously all the new and shiny stuff we don't get up here in Canada, so anyone who's stuck in Canada, we wait a little while to make sure everything's fully baked. And we're reaching a point where DevOps is now fully grown. I talk to banks all the time. I talk to major financial firms that all have DevOps practices. They all have some degree of DevOps infused in their organization. Sometimes they talk about it more than they actually do it, but we're moving in a direction where it's spreading, and it's now at a point where I think people are comfortable having a large degree of collaboration throughout their organization, which is really cool. How am I doing on time? Because I'm not keeping track. Yes. Great. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the future, what I am keeping track of, and then really what I want to hear from you. I want to hear your ideas, and I think we want to start a dialogue about what the future of DevOps is, because a lot of people don't talk about it often enough, in my opinion, but I'm a big future fan, so bear with me. So we're seeing a lot of machine learning and AI everywhere now. I think less so in DevOps. I would like to see us move further in that direction. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff around what I mentioned, maturity modeling. The Devops Checklist is a very static site. Doesn't do anything for you, but taking the concepts of maturity and measurement against best practices and instilling that into your organization automatically, I think is really exciting. So things like AWS, guard duty, and other services that will monitor your entire infrastructure and tell you where you are falling behind or there's things that you need to pay attention to. Powering that with machine learning and AI to filter out the signal from the noise and sort of help you prioritize and maybe make suggestions would be fantastic. There's a lot of, with all that data that we've got now and all this monitoring we're doing, like how many people are dealing with IoT right now in their companies? Cool, cool, wow. I don't envy you guys. I don't envy the amount of data that you have to deal with and the amount of noise that you have to sift through. Maybe it's better than I think it is, but it seems like a massive challenge. And I know that I hear about what happens in the US military collecting information from drones and from sensors. They just throw it in a pile and don't know if they'll ever look at it, right? So I think getting us to a point where we can bring that data back to the forefront and do something really interesting with it is exciting. Prediction, we have a couple companies, probably a couple of sponsors that will be able to show you predictions based on usage patterns and monitoring data in the past, and I think that's really great. Being able to predict spikes and load is kind of where we can get a lot of value from this stuff. And then exploration, you know, obviously you don't want to let loose AI on your systems or your data, but in, I think small doses of machine learning and AI can help us sift through all the data that would choke a human to death. And that's kind of awesome because we have no idea what we'll find when we dig into it, which could be scary, but I'm an optimist. We're seeing cloud sort of rise to these everything as a service providers, right? Amazon now has a service for everything. All the other clouds are catching up and sort of specializing in different ways to differentiate themselves. And it's becoming less necessary to sort of roll your own whatever, especially now that there's more trust in the public clouds and more security in place to make sure that they're safe. So it's kind of cool that you can build a company and just pick and choose from these existing services, plug them in, and focus on your craft, right? Focus on the thing that you want to do better than everybody else. Speaking of AWS, I have no idea what they're going to do, but they're now at like 120 different services, and they grow them crazy. If you've ever seen the RSS feed from their release notes, it's like just from 28 alone, you would need machine learning just to read through it all. So I have no idea what they're going to do to manage this, but it's interesting thinking of, you now have this almost like a grocery store full of products and services that you can pick and choose from. And it's almost at the point where you can only find it by searching, right? So they're becoming sort of like an e-commerce site for services that you run. And I don't know what they'll do with that, but they keep growing and growing. So I say scaled transformation. I don't know if that is a term yet, but basically I wanted to mention the idea that we have these large enterprises, a lot of financial companies, a lot of healthcare firms. They have a center of excellence that is fully DevOps compatible, fully agile, and then the rest of the organization is AS400 and a bunch of old legacy crap, right? So I would like to see the industry sort of scale that center of excellence to a common practice rather than this silo unto itself, right? I mean, there's a lot of companies where they talk about a lot about agility, and they will go to events and talk about how they're super agile, but it can be one or two departments in the company, and that's cool if you're going into that department, but what's it really doing for the business, right? And there are a lot of, like, I was at DevOps Enterprise in 2014, a lot of companies there that were talking about how much benefit they've seen from DevOps. And now I hear in 2018 that they're brutally difficult to work with and they're just crawling along. So we've got to do something to sort of spread this capability throughout an organization. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how people are doing that. Maybe scaled agile framework is working. I don't know, I haven't checked in a while. But maybe there are things that I haven't heard of that are helping companies spread DevOps throughout the entire organization. And I'd be curious to hear from you about that. Human factors are a massive thing in DevOps. And I think, now we are finally at a point where people are not so obsessed with tools, they're not so obsessed with pipelines and the other fancy, shiny things, at least I hope not, and sort of thinking about what is it like to be on call for weeks at a time, or to be in a team where you can't raise your opinion, or your team has a tragically low diversity. These are really interesting things for us in 2018, and I think they deserve a lot of attention because it's the difference between a high-performing team and a team with burnout and potentially, toxic interactions, and that's very un-DevOps. It's very unproductive, and I think, we should spend time leveling up the entire industry and making better places to work and better teams to work on. We're sort of approaching kind of a golden age of integration. Like, I think there's a lot of companies that are the pipes behind the scenes, blending different tools together. And there's companies like Zapier and Workato where you can take tools that were never meant to connect to each other and plug them in because they are APIs that are compatible with each other and they're backed by simple and safe authentication, and that's an authorization. And I think that's really cool. I think we'll see a lot more of that in the future to reduce that dependency on building everything yourself, right? As we raise our standards for security, then we can start to collaborate a lot easier. Simulation is kind of interesting. Like, I really like the idea of being able to simulate failure events, simulate different types of traffic easier, or different attack patterns, penetration testing, without having to bring in an outside firm or run an audit. You could just have something running continuously, right? And I don't really know what we could do with something like simulation, but just the idea of using maybe our artificial intelligence to come up with possibilities or examine possibilities is really exciting, especially when you're looking at, maybe we sign 50 more customers in the next month. What does that do, right? What does it look like? What does it look like if we have to cut the bill in half? Things like that. As we collaborate more, I think it puts some responsibility on us to make sure that collaboration doesn't violate any of our compliance obligations. Obviously, a lot of people. How many people are sort of like SOC compliant or ISO compliant here? Cool. Okay, you guys are. The other half is lucky, but maybe you haven't yet. Maybe you're about to. But I think we have this natural conflict between our desire to collaborate with people and then our obligations to not be sharing everything with everyone all the time, right? We sort of have to be good about that, and tooling and automation around keeping track of all that and making it easy for people to join and then jump out is very interesting, and I don't think it's commoditized yet. It's still pretty challenging to have someone leave your team and then roll all your keys. Sometimes you can do that for 80% of your systems, and then the last mile is really painful. But I would like to see the industry get a lot better at that and make it very easy for you to sort of bring up and tear down and have people join and leave teams. And involve outside contractors without having to worry so much about exposing everything to them. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention blockchain because it is everywhere all the time. But I actually think, and I'm probably going to have to go to my notes here just to reference, but I think there's really interesting things that we can do with blockchain in the sphere of DevOps. Like, obviously we have source code. Git is not a blockchain, but it has characteristics, and I think the ability to verify your code all the way through different environments and in different situations is really cool. Being able to guarantee the integrity of your artifacts, maybe a different way, or by shipping them across systems where they can be independently and verified in a decentralized way is kind of cool. But just generally, decentralization is an amazing concept for us because right now we deploy everything inside of VPCs or our own data centers, and we try and keep things very tightly contained. And if we didn't have to, I would be a happier person. But I think we have a ways to go to figure out exactly what that looks like, and I'm excited to see what happens. How many people here are fans of blockchain and crypto stuff? Cool. Okay. If any of you are interested in giving a talk on DevOps and blockchain, I would love to have it at the meetup. But really, any of these topics, I would encourage you to get in touch. We have a CFP open for the meetup on callforpapers.io. I will post it in the Slack. I will try and get it up in front of people. I forgot to put the link. But you can basically submit a talk idea just like you did for the conference, which I hope you did, for the meetup, and we would love to hear from you. So I wanted to go right back to human factors before I finish, just because I think it's so important, and I think it's so difficult, and I think it deserves a lot of attention. So if anybody has insight about that, I would love to hear about that at the meetup as well. I would love to have conversations about it. How we achieve psychological safety in teams, how we make it very easy for people to share ideas and collaborate together and feel really great about it and not feel like it's a competition or not feel like imposters. There's so much psychology that goes into what we do and how we work with other people that I would encourage you to think about it and share your thoughts, and I would love to hear them. There's also some interesting material around this, like there's concepts like cybernetics. I don't know if anyone's ever looked into that, but it's basically around organization of information and how we share information between people. Things like Cynefin as a framework for modeling things, different mental models. I can share more if you guys are interested. Just send me a tweet, and I could try and put some things together. But I'd also love to hear from you guys. And I think us being here as a community is very important to DevOps. Sharing our stories, sharing failures, sharing success. It's all amazing, and it really makes a big difference between just going to a conference and really enjoying yourself, in my opinion. Like having those interactions with people where you find the person who has the problem that you have or the problem that you have and they've had it before and they've solved it is amazing. So take advantage of the crowd. And so I would encourage you to share your ideas with the group. I don't know if this hashtag is in use, to be honest, but hopefully it's not in use for anything scandalous. COC disclaimer. But yeah, if you've got ideas, share them. If you've got questions, thoughts, I think Twitter is an amazing thing that I've always loved to use at conferences. So I encourage you to use it and share with everybody else. And all my emojis are so weird. But most of all, welcome to Toronto. Welcome to the Toronto DevOps community. If you travel from out of town, if you're here for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for being here and putting up with me.
Well done, Steve. Well done.